It is now 1 o'clock.
Okay, we'll call the meeting September 7th, the F and J to order. Do you want to try this meeting?
It's Scott's.
It's Scott?
Yeah.
You're gonna go
You
tonight.
get to just hang out.
I've been
You
the
get to
chair
run
for
the
like
whole
10
night.
years. But you're sorry. I'm sorry. You can do it if you want. No.
I don't
Go
know if you're
ahead.
really allowed to do that, but
You got it. You
In
got
his
it.
absence.
roll call. It is, all right, Scott McClory,
Here.
Ken Minell,
Here.
Tim Sharota,
Here. Sorry, Scott.
No, no worries. Our first item is a review and discussion regarding the 2024-2028 capital improvement projects.
Thank you.
Who would like to kick this off?
There's some.
There are two together.
hopefully someone with finance knowledge.
So I will take one for the team, if you will, and kick this party off. So if you look at the top page, the one that's on the left-hand column, you should see a department column, and the top one says electric utility.
Okay, so the packet that starts with electric utility.
Yep.
Okay.
So basically, the two packets you see, the first one lists the projects, proposed projects by department. And then the second package shows them by funding source. So we can just kind of go down the list here and just go through these department projects. You'll see that electric utilities planning on installing some LED lights, transformers, installation of 3-phase meters, brush hog, trailer, and replacing a vehicle. The EMS is looking for, and these projects are from 2024 to 2028. You can tell what year the project is based upon what year the column is filled in terms of what funding. You'll see that the ambulance, the EMS is planning on trying to get a new ambulance in 2024. Fire is trying to budget for a new ladder truck in 2025. And then as part of the county radio transition, we're budgeting both for fire, police, and public works are budgeting for new radio equipment in order to be compliant with the county's new radio system. We're going to get some funding from the county. We just don't quite yet know how much. And then one of the items on here that's a newer topic is trying to budget money for a feasibility study for either replacing, either rehabbing the existing fire station or building a new one. I know this is something that the chief has had concerns about. When that fire station was created, it's a part-time station. I mean, the living quarters / just situation there is not great. It's very small. If anybody's taken a tour, been up there, they really don't have good sleeping situations. It's sort of just like an open family room style with about, 6 beds in there maybe. So it's not ideal. And so it just, for a lot of these reasons, and you guys have seen the office space in there is not great. So we're proposing to have some sort of a feasibility study to say, hey, should you remodel existing? Do they need to in order to service the entire service area? Should there be another satellite built somewhere else? Just what is the recommendation? So that's on the proposal for next year. Under law enforcement, we were supposed to repair the elevator at the county building this year due to the budget cost or due to the cost that came in when the county got an estimate. It was too expensive, and so the county punted and said they didn't want to do it this year. They said they may or may not do it next year. So we've got money we already borrowed for this current year that we can carry forward to next year. But because we budgeted 150 this year and that wasn't going to be enough either. So I'm proposing to increase that to 200,000 next year in case the county does move forward with rehabbing or repairing that.
We're just going to keep carrying it over until the county says they're ready to replace their elevator?
Well, yes and no. Unfortunately, we can't, because of the bond, we only have 3 years, 3 years max to be able to do it, to use the bond money we already got. So we'd have to rebond for it in the future, but we'll keep it on the CIP, for the foreseeable future.
Right.
And if they don't end up doing it, then we can't use the bond money we already took. Well, then that bond money will just go to pay, the debt service on that prior bond, and we just may have to bond for it again in the future. Library is proposing to, and, you know, the PD is planning on doing, replacing some vehicles. Library is proposing to get a new digital sign for in front of their building, as well as to install some security cameras. Public Works, I won't necessarily go through every single one of these, but main thing is just that, you know, there's a couple of vehicles that the Public Works wants to buy. The CIP includes not only the annual maintenance, the $100,000 we usually budget for maintenance, but there's projects from 24 to 28 in terms of street improvement projects, which at least as far as 2024 and 2025, you'll see that if you flip the page at the bottom of that Public Works section, you'll see that in 24, we're planning on doing phase 2 of East Centralia. And 25, we're planning on doing phase 3, which would be West Centralia. So those are basically our big 24 and 25 street improvement projects are basically going to be the Centralia projects. And then in 26, you'll see there's a street improvement project planned for 26 of $7,134,000. Matt, do you, off the top of your head, know what streets are included in that one?
26.
Yeah.
Sunset Drive from West Page to Jefferson. Van Buren from West Page to Jefferson. Jefferson Street from Sunset Drive to Easterly Termini, and Olson Street from Jefferson to Court. So these are all kind of in that same general area adjacent. I'd say the biggest project is probably Jefferson Street from Sunset to Easterly Termini. And then there's a couple of side streets off of that that are all not in that great of shape either. The reason that we identified Jefferson is kind of in coordination with the water department, because I know they have concerns with lead services in that area. So that would help with them getting the lead out. So, and I know it's a large number. We've been working on, we actually have a 10-year CIP put together now. So if we wanted to pull one of these out, we certainly could, but it was a starting point for getting a 5-year in place. So. A couple of the other things while Adam's out, I can mention for Public Works specifically is that we are budgeting some dollars for those DOT projects that are starting to come on board. So down at the bottom of the first page, you've got WSDOT SMFAs. So that's the state municipal financial agreements. And they are designing these now, slowly but surely getting started. So roughly put in $65,000 per year for the next 4 years, and then start to ramp it up in 28 with hopes that one will start at that time. So,
Thanks, Matt. So, and then of course we are planning on the bypass lane for 24 on 12. I don't know if Matt just covered that or not, but.
no, I didn't cover that one.
And I know Matt started to say this. We don't have 2028's street improvement projects included on this yet. We'll get that fixed obviously before council actually reviews this. But the street improvement projects for 24 to 27 are on here. And as Matt alluded to, just because of the debt limit, you know, we may not really be able to bond for almost $6 million worth of street projects in 26, or I should say 25. And then 26, those amounts may be too big. So we may have to move some of those projects around or reallocate those street projects just because, you know, we just can't bond for that much. So
For those later years, it was just kind of an earmark of streets that we should be looking at, and we'll refine it as we go. The next couple of years, we've got pretty well ironed out with cost estimates from Kapoor. But for those last couple of years, it still needs some tweaking in order to make it work.
Oh, and moving on to the recreation, I don't know, Carl or Matt, are there any of these projects you particularly want to highlight? I guess the one I would just mention is the band shell restoration. That's one that's, the band shell's anniversary is in 2026, 100 years old. 100 years old, yeah. So we've talked about, you know, having some sort of a rehab, refurbishment goal of doing that by 26. And I know there's grant funding out there as well as some private donations that we think might happen. So the challenge is, the city a few years ago got a feasibility study on a cost estimate of what it would take to rehab that, but that was 2019.
Yeah, that's correct.
And so obviously prices have gone kind of increased significantly since 2019. So we think it'd be really advantageous. And in order for some of the grants that we're interested in applying for, you have to have a recent cost estimate of what it is. And so, so it's one of those things that we would need to hire an architect or engineering firm to give us an updated estimate to know what kind of fixes are needed in order to then be able to actually apply for grants and or to then try and solicit private donations. So we've estimated 100,000, and that's based upon,
It's based upon the assessment that was back in 2019, and then the building itself is eligible to be on the National Registry of Historic Places, which opens up more grant funding, but that is also a process to apply for. And I've already met with Katie James about the band shell too. I know that there's a lot of interested parties and there's a lot of grant funding opportunities, but in order to get those funds, we have to have a recent assessment. And the other thing too is that the assessment needs to be done by a historic renovation like company or assessor, I think it is. So by doing that, it opens up the doors for the grants.
In the current report we have wasn't.
Yeah, it's not eligible. Katie James already kind of looked at the current report and it's not eligible. Yeah.
Back when we did that, it was purely because of kind of structural concerns, just because of the age of it and the foundation and how it's kind of setting. So we wanted to make sure that, is this still safe to operate? And
Yeah, and it is.
it is, it's just, but that's the reason why that first one was done the way that it was.
so the 100,000 you see in 24 is more realistic that we would have to pay that money up front to do the assessment, but then the 455,000 you see for 25 is what we think the project cost might be. But that, like I said, we're hoping to get funding for, but at this point it's a little speculative. So when we look at the actual funding sources on the next, packet, we didn't necessarily specify exactly, what we thought, how much funding we'd get, unless it's grant funding or donations. So, and then Matt, I don't know if you want to talk about any of the, a couple quick things. One, the Park and Rec Committee has recommended putting in a dog park. Is that accurate?
Yeah.
Where exactly is that going to be located?
At the end of North Church Street, kind of by, is it Holton Manor? Is that the? Yeah, so that's technically a retention area, but it's never wet, and it would be perfect for a dog park because you can't have a building on it. It's close proximity for people to walk their dog. It was designed to be like a fenced-in area for someone to come in off leash. So again, that's not going to happen in 2024. Planning for 2025, and that's just kind of a cost estimate because Williams Bay built one that would be similar in size, so we were able to accommodate our cost estimate off of that.
And Alderman McClory, do you understand the location, or do you want to? I can pull it up on the map if that helps, or.
No, you're talking right on the curb, instead of going, like, taking a left and going up towards Highway 8, you're going straight past Holton Manor.
Yep.
Where they have the little baby sledding hill kind of thing.
So that's on the plan. We did budget for next year, or plan for next year. Matt has affectionately dubbed it Rolling Creek Park, just because we're trying to figure out, this is the new 39-acre parcel the city bought. Again, the Park and Rec Committee is working on some recommendations for what to do with that. So we tentatively budgeted 50,000 for next year because we know we have to get the house torn down as well as to get some of the utilities disconnected. So that's where that estimate came from. Carl, do you want to either talk about any of the stuff going on at the pool or the rec center?
Yeah, the rec center, I know that there's one for just security cameras. We don't have any security on our building now. We have security at the pool, and then by default too, the system would set up a point-to-point connection between the pool and the rec center. So we would use the Wi-Fi at the rec center, which would in fact reduce our costs for Wi-Fi having at the pool seasonally. And then it'll just keep our building safe because I know that we have a lot of, unfortunately, people who vandalize property and everything like that. So it'll be nice to have that option.
That quote included adding access control at
Yes.
the bathrooms too, the
Yes,
lion's den,
that's
so
correct.
that they would
Yeah.
open up automatically in the morning and close them in the evening, so that, if they weren't able to be closed because of an incident where PD had to respond to, that they would be closed. So that's the same thing that we're doing with the Bay Man Park. That's hopefully going to start here shortly. We're getting point-to-point Wi-Fi from this building. As long as you could see it, you can get Wi-Fi out there with point-to-point technology. So that's how we're going to get it out of Bay Man Park. That's not on here, but I'll just give you an example.
I might be misremembering this, but I could have swore within the last 5 or 10 years, we redid the whole Bay Man Park walking path.
We had planned on doing the walking path. You talking about paving the path around the lake?
Yeah.
We had talked about incorporating that into the ADA improvements project, but then they at the last minute almost, they pulled the funds after we had left the project.
Okay, maybe that's why
And
it's,
then we talked about the project again at, I believe it was a council meeting, and we ended up pulling pieces out so that we could use the funds that we had left. And one of the ones that just, that we couldn't afford to do, that had to go, was unfortunately the path.
And we did apply for grants in 2020 and 2021.
okay, so we,
DNR that
so,
did not
okay,
get.
so I knew that we at least had talked about it.
Yeah, yeah.
So this would make it completely asphalt?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. So right now, we just have like packed limestone kind of thing.
Yep.
And I think one of the reasons we talked about going full asphalt was so that it would be ADA compliant with people in wheelchairs, right?
Yep.
Yeah.
And strollers and whatever versus
Yeah.
trying to get through it now. Okay,
It's tough to get up to the new shelter, honestly, without having it.
yeah, okay,
But that's planned for 25, just so everybody's clear on that.
yeah.
I'm glad
Do we
you,
have lighting right now already at Harris Field?
So there's existing lighting at Varsity and Harris.
That's what I thought.
Yeah. So.
We need new lighting?
So Varsity, the middle field, a bank of lights went out last year, and we tried to replace the ballast, and you could no longer get them.
Okay,
So in talking with Carl, we used the lights more at Harris. So the plan is that if we could replace the lights at Harris, it's $235, which is less than it would be to replace the lights at Varsity, but then we could use those ballasts as kind of a, reservoir, an area to where we could use them for Varsity as they go out, because you can't get them anymore. So it would
Okay.
create inventory for us to be able to maintain Varsity for hopefully many years to come.
okay.
But field lighting it's not cheap.
Oh, no, for sure.
Yeah, and then I know Harris red lights are older than Varsity lights as well, so I think they're a couple years older.
so, moving on to, sewer, the sewer's got, a couple big projects, one being, the northeastern lift station abandonment, the extending the sanitary sewer. And yes, that project is going to benefit the water department, but it is a sewer project and would also in the future potentially provide sewer service to development on that side of the city. So, so right now, tentatively, it's estimated at $7 million for that project. We have applied for clean water revolving loan funds. We haven't heard back yet, but the one thing I did want to mention too on this cost estimate, FOTH is, helping us with this project, and they had a really hard time estimating the cost because it's going to depend on whether they have to do any de-watering of that field and area. So they got some pretty very significant disparity in terms of the estimates as to how much that could cost. It could be nothing or it could be a couple $1 million. So that's really what's made estimating that cost, challenging. So when we applied for the funding from the clean water, we applied for the max, worst case scenario of dewatering. You'll see Matt's got some I&I work he wants to do in 24. Basin 2, Matt, where's Basin 2?
It's kind of on the westerly side of the city, closer to downtown though. So the way that we looked at it is we've televised everything in town now, and we looked at kind of two sections, 4 and 5, which are new areas, and we did an assessment, and that's 250,000, and then Basin 2, which is the older basin, was 1.7 million. So because of the lift station that we're looking at in 25, we decided to put Basin 2 ahead of the rest of the improvements in 4 and 5. So this is, we've touched every other basin except for these three. So
Okay.
I think it's important. I mean, for I, we've been talking about it for years and, you know, we're still continuing. I mean, I just met with Welcome last week about our I and it has actually, in looking at some graphs and some charts and the flows that they've been seeing, it has gone down, but it's also been drier the last couple of years too. But it's good that it's on a downward trend. We've made lots of effort and I think it's, we haven't had an overflow since we started doing our I mitigation back in 2021. So that's really good. I think we need to keep up on that.
And then moving on to water, I guess just a couple things. As you know, we've been rehabbing several wells recently between well 6 and well 7. And I know the council is aware of well 6, which we just talked about at the most recent, or one of the recent council meetings. Related to that, you know, well 6 is at Centralia, at the water treatment plant there. And one of the upcoming needs is to figure out what the city's going to do about the downtown water treatment plant. The water there is really good. So, you know, there's definitely justification to maybe keep that either the plant open or to at least be able to continue using the wells out there, even if you don't use the entire water treatment plant. There's some options to sort of use like a mini water processing facility. So that's going to be something that we're planning on doing in 25 in terms of more long-term planning. But as part of that, in the short term, we're going to need for this is a sooner need or earlier need is the reservoir at the downtown Centralia water treatment plant is old and they're concerned about the structural integrity of this reservoir. So basically, at any point, the reservoir roof could cave in. And if that happens, then obviously there's a problem because now the well, which feeds into the reservoir, which then feeds the water treatment plant, now the water from the well can't get into the water treatment plant. So the good news is that there's an option to be able to, should be an option to be able to just directly tie in the well to the water treatment plant and bypass the reservoir, in part because the water quality at that particular well is good. So that's also going to be something that needs to be a much sooner conversation. Is a contingency plan if in fact the reservoir does fail. So right now I know we're waiting to get water quality results back just to be sure as to whether you could directly tie from the well to the water treatment plant and not use the reservoir. So once we get that information, we'll be coming back to council for guidance on that. But that's just something to be aware of. And then, so you'll see that we've budgeted money next year for feasibility study to talk about longer term planning about Centralia and replacing the reservoir. And then the other thing too is we got the Lakeland HMO project, which you guys were also aware of, that we have done the design work for, and we're planning on putting that out for bid in 24. We've applied for funding from the DNR for clean water funds on that. The good thing about the Lakeland cost, the 3.6 million you see, is that we are still in the running for funding from the feds through the congressional directed spending. We submitted an application early this year, January, February, for that, and we're still on the recommended list. So, and basically at this point, at this stage in the game, the projects that are on the list have typically been funded. So we're really optimistic that we're going to get that funding, which would just be a straight grant. So hopefully the 3 million that you see for Lakeland, we won't actually have to borrow money for that. That we'll just get the grant money from the feds, but we're not 100% sure. So obviously we're planning on having to take clean water funds instead, but that's potentially some good news, at least for the water department, which has had a lot of challenging news. So this is just an overview of the projects as a whole. Do you guys have any questions or anything about the projects themselves in terms of?
I don't have anything immediately.
I just wanted to bring up, and I know I've talked to Matt about this. I get calls at least 4 or 5 a year about West Lawn Street. It is a washboard. It's bad. And it's been on the list for 5, 6 years. and it appears to keep getting bumped down.
West Lawn, I think we just did that one.
No, not westward.
Oh, westward.
Westward. And like, I know it got bumped because of Green Acres, and I think it got bumped when Centralia got postponed a year, because that
Right.
might have been part of the Green Acres thing. But you just went through the list and it wasn't even on the list. So it's been bumped again
I didn't bring the
By-
10-year.
by Van Buren and Olson and whatever. And like I say, I wouldn't be doing my job if I didn't bring it up.
No, I understand.
Especially if it's not in the list for the next 5 years.
It's
Right.
already been on the list.
No, now it's not.
Yeah.
This is the, up through 2028, it's not listed, but so
Yeah, and just so you, just,
maybe we should revisit that.
yeah, actually Westward is, and you wouldn't know this because
It's not on here.
the 2027 project that's referenced in here is actually Westward. So here's a copy of it.
Okay, I can at least,
And I, you know,
tell my
2028.
people that,
2027.
Okay.
Okay,
So it's,
that's good.
this is the, so Matt has his
Are
own
you
separate.
intentionally making this a smaller print every time you?
No,
get
that was
something?
me.
This is Matt's fault, okay. So Matt has his own 10-year street CIP that he is maintaining. I just printed off the front page because it covers 24 to 27, and 28 is still a little TBD. But just so you can see, and yes, I do apologize if the print is super small, but if you want to at least see what street sections were tentatively included, Westward is on there for 27, so.
There you go, Tim.
okay,
Good thing you brought it up.
well, I'm glad I brought it up, but
Yeah.
I'm not particularly satisfied. It keeps getting bounced all the way to 27.
I went over, I think when we were talking, I went over projects for 26. And that, we got Centralia Phase 2 and 24, Centralia Phase 3 and 25. And then 26 was those streets that I mentioned, Jefferson, Olson, Van Buren, and Sunset, thank you. Yeah, so, but yeah, so for 27, it is in there. I mean, there's always discussion too. I mean,
I guess
we
my-
look at the road ratings and then kind of just based off of that, and then also the utility needs too. And that's probably, and not to jump in front of you, but that it may have got bumped to 27 instead of 26 because of the concerns with the water, honestly.
Oh, yeah, I get
Yeah,
it.
so, but it's not to say that we can't move things around either.
You want them to take a look at moving it into 26
Well,
somehow?
I guess I'd love to have it moved up, but I understand about the utilities if there's a problem. That's why we did Green Acres when we did as an emergency, because it was collapsing basically. But that
Well,
doesn't
I
help,
mean-
that doesn't help the citizens when they call you.
Right, for sure.
Let me chat with Tim too and see what utility needs are on Westward, because I mean, that could depend on what type of project we do. If it's just you know, if no utility replacement is needed, it's just, you know, like a mill and fill where you're just replacing the pavement, just like we did on Market Street not too long ago, or just this year rather, I'm sorry, then it would lessen the cost. We might be able to pull that forward. I could look into that one specifically for you.
That'd be wonderful.
You got anything that jumps out at you, Ken? All right.
The only thing I would say,
Westward, how wide it is?
it's awfully wide. We'd want to narrow that. And there's no sidewalk right now either, so we'd want to take a look at pedestrian improvements as well at the same, I would be surprised if it's not a reconstruct.
That's
You
gonna.
You have water sitting in the curb there on the street.
You gotta have sidewalks on that street.
It is very wide, and I agree with you, Joel. I mean, when I first looked at it, I mean, this cost estimate is based off of doing that. So that's why, you know, is put where it's at. But if we felt that it really needed, the way to push it forward would be to probably make it a lesser of a project and just focus on the pavement replacement. But because of it being more of a recon and like you mentioned, I think 26 was really heavy. 27 is would be a lot less, and we could try to balance those.
Well, I mean, the thing is, because 26 is heavy and the Western project actually is, it might actually make more sense to move 27 to 26 because you may have to move some of 25 to 26 as well, because 25 is too heavy, so it might actually work out.
Okay. And the reason that we had for 26, again, it was kind of based off of discussions with water and the need for the utility work there. And those adjacent streets that are just in as bad repair as Jefferson, that's why that cost got to be so high. I mean, we could always look at paring those back for some of those quote unquote side roads too, but we could take a look at that.
And speaking of downtown projects, one thing I didn't mention earlier that is actually a big topic to talk to you guys about is as far as next year you'll see that we have tentatively planned on $75,000 for a feasibility study for downtown. This is some members of the EEDA have approached us about trying to do some sort of a streetscapes improvement downtown to figure out what to do with the bricks as well as the, parking layout. And is there a way to improve downtown? And if we're going to do that, well, we would need to get some sort of guidance. And so we got some cost estimates from a couple other cities that have done this recently. And that's where the 75 came from. Whether you guys want to do that or not is another question. Part of the challenge being, if the feasibility study comes back and says, yeah, you could do this, big project downtown for $8 million. The problem is we don't have the bonding capacity to be able to do that. And that's kind of what you can see you can see the projects we've got over the next 4 or 5 years. I mean, we're already pushing $4, $5, $6 million in bonding just for the street projects alone. And that's really, where our cap is going to be at. So whether we could afford a huge, large downtown redevelopment project, I can't say financially we can, but at the same time, the request is coming to do something. I know you have concerns about the brickwork down there. So, maybe there's some middle of the road approach where, can we do more of a streetscapes without doing a more significant street rehab? And the one caveat to this is that the state is going to be coming in and we think 27, 28, 29 and doing a mill and overlay, just a repaving of the county road, the connecting highway that goes through there. But that's just going to be a simple, they pave it, they will put in new ADA ramps.
Right.
But they don't help out after that. They just stop right there.
And we can incorporate other components into the project. I mean, if we wanted to do a full-blown, redo of downtown, I think the state would consider it, but when the state comes through and does a project, they have a whole slew of different requirements and it can become very costly. So if we were interested in doing something like that, I think it would be in our best interest to let them come through, do their thing, and then us come back and then privately let out another project. But we have been working with Unilock, and who supplied all of the brick when we did the renovation project 20 years ago. We did that all downtown, and they've been willing to work with us on giving the blocks to us at no cost if we install them. So we're going to start pecking away at replacing some of the bricks downtown. It's going to take a little while because we're going to try to do it internally. But as far as, I know the thought from the group is, or it seems like the consensus is that they want to make it more ADA accessible, which I would love to in order to get rid of all the steps. But that means building the road up, which would be a huge undertaking. So I don't know how you would.
That'd be tough. I think we just haven't maintained what we've had down there as far as the streetscape. And, Matt looked at it and I think a couple other people did. And if we can just bring that, carry that over, like you said, if we replace some of them here and some of them there, just get it back, because some of them are really bad. It's like an embarrassment if you go down and look, the pavers they've just been eaten up by the salt.
And honestly, that's Unilock's reason they have just as much motivation to get this done as we do.
Yeah.
Because they are right outside of Elkhorn and they bring clients into Elkhorn to eat dinner and they've got their product falling apart in front of restaurants and everything else. So,
but if they work with us, that, the product is going to be free and we just have to, get the labor. I think it's a pretty good deal. We should take advantage of.
And I'm not trying to, I think that, there's good plans for a feasibility study. I just don't know what would come out of it that's much different than what we have, to be honest.
I've said this before and I'm going to say it again, just so I'm on the record. I always struggle with feasibility studies. We hire somebody, they say, yep, your downtown needs work. Here's my bill for $48,000. Gee, thanks. I didn't already know that.
Well, and just for clarification, this would be more of a, it'd be more of a, hey, here's a plan as to how, like, options for improving it. It wouldn't just be like it needs it, but more of a, okay, if people are unhappy with the current setup, like what alternatives are out there? If people are trying to, you know, do something else other than the brickwork or have more parking or whatever, the concerns are, okay, how are you going to change it? Because, neither Matt nor I are architects or engineers. So,
Yeah.
So
think-
based on the 5-year CIP outlay then, the way the numbers shake out with either you or Corey or whomever, we have the funds to support all these projects through these 5 years?
and that's what I'm going to get to next. So
Okay.
this is the project.
I know I took your thunder there, but
This was the plan, or I should say, these are some of the projects and how this got together was, all the department directors sent their request to us. A few of them were not included just because they just were not feasible, or, department directors later changed their minds, or we, in one case, actually got a grant to cover something. So we actually got somebody donated money to pay for the AEDs. So we were able to take those out for the police department. But in terms of paying for it, that's obviously the biggest challenge. So if you can turn to the second packet.
okay.
And I guess really the biggest thing to really focus on right now is as far as the water and sewer projects, we're mostly relying on the Clean Water Fund and Safe Drinking Water Fund loans to come through in order to pay for those. So, you'll see, the Clean Water Fund, we're looking at that to cover the cost of the Northeastern Extension and the Nettesheim project, as well as the Centralia street reconstructions or projects. But the biggest, limitation we have is geodebt. I mean, that's really what is our biggest limitation. So you'll see, starting at the bottom, all the projects that would be funded by geodebt are listed there. And if you flip over the page, you'll see the remainder of that list. And you'll see at the bottom that right now it's totaling $4.3 million in terms of geodebt. And our debt limit is, that we estimate next year, is going to be 4.2 million. So so if we've got projects of 4.3 and we have geodebt of 4.2, or I should say we have a limitation of 4.2, we're about $100,000 over where we can be. So basically, we're going to have to cut at least $100,000 in a geodebt project in order to get that 4.3 million to the 4.2 million. So I think that probably answers your question, Alderman McClory. As far as 24, 25, 26, 27, that's tougher to predict at this point. I've reached out to Joe Murray, and he's going to be kind of doing another update where he looks at, our existing debt and the debt that's coming off and the tax free, and is going to have an update for us as to, for the future projects that you see that are going to be funded by geodebt in 25, 26, 27, those street projects, what can we do? What is the limitation? And that's going to change these numbers. So it's like, we've got a good estimate for 24, 25, 26. It's unclear, but based upon 24's limit, I don't see that we can bond for $6 million in 25 or bond for, $5.5, $6 million in 26. I just don't think that's going to be feasible, but we'll know for certain once we hear back from Joe. So as a result, we are going to have to take off $100,000 of geodebt projects for next year in order to stay under our limit.
Okay.
Is it 100, even, roughly? Or?
Roughly 100, yeah. Because it's 4.2, I've got it here. 4.226 is the limit.
Can you describe how that limit's arrived at, what that represents?
Yep, I can do that. So here's the calculation for how that is derived. I'll try to zoom in a little bit more. So the statutory limit says by the state, we can't have more than 5% of our equalized value is the statutory debt limit. So you'll see it's technically $59 million. Our equalized value, which we just got, came in much higher than we had been expecting. So I know a year ago when Joe, or actually earlier this year, when Joe came and did his projections, his equalized value prediction, that's almost $1.2 billion. He was estimating is what it might be like in 3 years. So we're ahead of schedule from an equalized value perspective, which is both good and bad, because obviously it's reflecting housing prices, et cetera. But in terms of the statutory debt limit, so we got 59 million is the cap by the state. But our city policy says our debt can't exceed 65% of the state limit. So then that brings you down to the 38 million. We, looking at it, Corey and I are estimating at the end of 23, we should have about almost $35 million in debt. We'll make 2 payments early next year prior to May, which you may remember this year, Joe came and council approved issuing the bonds in May. So that's kind of a cutoff we're looking at as to how much debt we have as of May, which by May of next year, we'll have about 34.6 million in debt. So if our city limit is that 38 million, then you just subtract, 34 from 38, and you get the available debt of 4.226. So that's kind of how we came up with it. We will we will be making a significant debt payment in early June, but, I don't necessarily think the council, maybe you would be, but I don't necessarily know if we want to take that subsequent June 1 debt payment and sort of say, oh, well, we're making a debt payment later on, so that gives us another $2 million to then, in available debt. I mean, if we're going to issue the debt in May, then that's the date we're trying to look at as far as how much debt we have, so.
Well, I know we've talked about this before, where if we're right up to the limit, if something happens, that's a problem. We have no leeway in there.
Well, the good news is, I mean, the statutory limit is what's really gonna, at the end of the day, like
Govern that.
like if some tragic, emergency happens, I mean, you guys as a council could go up to that 5% of the total equalized value, that almost 60 million. It's your city policy that says we don't want to exceed 65. Even the city policy says, like we can exceed 65 with, sort of a council exception, but under no circumstances should it exceed 75. But for purposes of preparing the CIP and the budget, we're using the 65 number because that's what it's saying. It shouldn't, like that's the target, so.
I know somebody said a number of years ago that bonding companies start getting squishy at about 60%. So at 65, I mean, that's probably fine, but if you're up at 75, aren't you gonna be paying a lot more interest?
Well, they do look at,
They could-
yeah.
I mean, they're gonna look at that negatively.
Well, it will harm our debt rating, yes. And right now we're around 61, 62, depending on, again, what time of the year you're looking at. So in terms of 62.
I guess I guess I probably fit the role as a curmudgeon pretty well, but, I'd be happy to cut more than 100,000 and have some wiggle room. It would just be me.
What do you recommend?
But here's an example. When we did Babe Man Park, it came in on that shelter, like, we projected 300,000, it came in at 800,000. And I remember we said, we've got to find a place to cut $500,000 when we went ahead with that project. To my knowledge, no one has cut $500,000 to make up for that yet. So that would just be a good starting point. So.
I think what I'd like to do, Lacey, if the committee agrees with me, is if we haven't already, send these to all the council members electronically. And then is it going to be on the next agenda to have a brief overview of this for the whole council, or are we going to keep it just in-house with F and J for now?
This is not my work, so I have no idea.
I guess I'm asking you and Adam, I guess.
You can do whatever you like, Scott.
Well,
Yeah.
what I don't want to see is I don't want the 3 people that are not in our committee be told, hey, take a look at this. We need to find, $500,000 in the next 5 minutes is coming up on the agenda. Or whatever magic number we come up with. I'd like them to be able to look at it. If they have questions, or if they have recommendations, whatever, bring those up, either direct, send them to us as F&J members, or send them to you, or do something so that we get their input, I guess is what I'm looking for. Because obviously, if you're not in that committee, it's kind of like Kenny with Planning Commission. There's a zillion things that get talked about at the Planning Commission. If you're not on that committee and you're not present at that committee, even reading the minutes, it's like Ken says we should do this, and here's the reason why. Our committee voted in favor of it. We generally go along with that. And the same would be true for F&J. The people that are not at this meeting are going to go, well, okay, where are you guys going to get rid of $400,000? Well, it doesn't seem to work, especially when it comes to money. We all know the people like Kenny and Tim and some others on our group, to their credit, are very tight about the money and want to hear, exactly why we're spending, or why we didn't get rid of this money, or we didn't move these funds, or whatever. So I just want to, I guess as a side note, I want to make sure these things get sent to all the committee members electronically with just a little blurb that says, right now we're 100,000 under, we have to get rid of minimally 100,000, maybe more. Take a look at this document and be prepared to, address what you would recommend would be the things we're going to cut, unless you guys disagree.
No, I think you're absolutely right.
Okay.
The Planning Commission is a good example because
Right.
we make a move with a conditional use permit or something,
Right.
and we approve it, and you guys all, that's the way it is.
Yeah. Okay.
Would you want the department heads to send you any sort of information explaining what they feel about their budget being cut? I mean, it's kind of important.
Well, all of us in public and private sector have worked with budgets.
Mhm.
And everybody knows this is a wish list. I'd love to, and I think Carl, I'm just using an example. I think yours was like $1.7 million or whatever it was. That's great. But there's some things, whether it gets cut from the police department or Carl's budget or the water utility, gets cut from somewhere. Of course, you're going to, I always say you're going to try to drive out in a Cadillac, but you're willing to drive home in a Ford Tempo. It's kind of the way it is with budgets. I mean, that you'd love to be able to, spend all the money you can spend, but if the funds aren't there to support those, and I don't think it would be prudent, my personal opinion, I don't think it'd be prudent to ask all the department heads to rationalize why they want what they want, because they've already done that.
Okay.
I mean, it's already here. This is, I'm sure that, like I said, I'm just using Carl as an example. The things that he put on his list for CIP are things that he genuinely thinks we really genuinely need. And you would be the same, and you would be the same, and you'd be the same.
Yeah, I mean, we definitely,
We've already got that.
yeah, just so you know, for items that, this was not the department directors were not told, hey, put down anything you might possibly want.
Of course.
And so, in fact, there were some items that people put on there where like, we still think we're too much of wish list, so they weren't actually included because
Sure,
like,
of course. And I would expect you to do that.
yeah.
Yeah. So, I mean, they're already at these are absolutely, we absolutely need to have these things. But, so.
There's some things here, like the radio, the Walworth County radio thing, we have to do that.
Kind of locked in on that.
Yeah.
So if we could
Right.
eliminate the ones we have to do, and then see what's left after that.
I think that can I go through a little bit of things
Sure.
that I kind of, it's okay. I don't want to, the feasibility study, I know we talked about that briefly. I mean, again, some of these are truly needs. If you go down the list, the library
Where are you
digital,
going down, the geodet?
geodet list,
Okay.
yeah. Yeah, like the library digital sign replacement, 7,000. I mean, even if you cut it, you're not really gaining that much. Chad would have to speak on that, I guess. The elevator, I think you almost have to have that in there in case the county does it, right?
I think for the most part, we're at the whim of the county on that,
Yeah.
really. So it's just a matter of when they think it's going to be feasible, I think.
But if you don't have it budgeted and they decide to go through the project, you're stuck. So that one almost needs to kind of stay. Vehicle replacement, equipment replacement, I don't know if I'd go off your schedule for that. And I'm assuming that everything on here is probably from the 5-year schedule that we have. So
The easiest thing that I see cutting to meet 2 masters would be to not do the asphalt around man, and that would be $500,000, and that's what we were asking about cutting.
We're just talking about 24.
That's 25.
I thought it was 24. I must have misread that.
And also too, that's also contingent on if we get grants as well.
Right.
So that's what it would be, the project.
I mean, even like the 2024 Rolling Creek Park, you know, we put 50 in there as an earmark, but you know, could you make that 25? I don't know. It depends on what we want to, what.
Can we hold off on the field, on the baseball field lighting?
We've already got a bank of lights out not to say that we couldn't. I think that, I mean. what did
Like
they
I said, no matter,
go mid-season
there's a
though?
good reason to keep everything on here, or else it wouldn't already be on the list.
Right.
That's the hard part about these things.
We went out like mid-season, didn't it, Joel? I mean, I remember you making us aware of it.
That's when I noticed it, when I was umpiring there. I don't know when it went out, actually.
They could have been playing for
It was dark.
a while.
It was
It
very
was dark.
So it would remain that way until we did something different. And one thing that we could do is use the banks of lighting from red and replace those.
Like I said, I think our best tactic is to send it out to the whole council and ask them to take a look at the geodet for 2024 and have some, even if it's on a little scribble pad, they can bring to the council meeting or to F&J with what recommendations they have to, no matter what, we have to get rid of 100 grand. We'd love to get rid of up to 500 grand to give us a little cushion, to Tim's point, but 100 grand is where we got to start, and right now we don't have that. So that's, I guess, our next marching order or task, I guess.
And put it on the next council agenda, which would be September 18th.
I guess Ken can speak for me.
I tried.
I won't be here.
What are your thoughts about either, maybe having this committee make a recommendation as to how we get there, just so that, because I guess my only concern is talking about it sort of a generality of like, hey, trying to have, you might just have, because like we've already been talking about it for 55 minutes, which is great. Like this is really helpful, and I appreciate you guys coming today, which is why we wanted to try to schedule this meeting. But because you guys have now been looking at it for a while, you understand it in a way that, you know, I don't know, it might be helpful if maybe you guys want to either schedule another meeting in a week, and then you can make a recommendation, and we can tell the council, hey, we cut these, you know, we needed to cut projects. This was cut, you know, Alderman Schroeder, whoever, you know, committees would also maybe like to see these additional cuts. And then if anybody has other ideas, we could do that. But at least if we've got a proposal for them to consider, that way.
Well, okay,
start from scratch.
maybe we can say it this way, Lacey, send it out to everybody and let them know that we will be making recommendations of cuts. If you have any questions about any items, or you want to speak on behalf of any of the items that you received, reach out to one of us or Adam directly to get, you know, whatever input you need. And that way it's still coming from our committee. Like you said, they were not here for an hour, and we're going to spend a whole hour going through this list again. And everyone that's there is going to go, you know, why are you reading this to me? I already heard about, well, all of us, we've already heard about this a week ago. So.
Well, do you want to have a meeting before the, you know, a meeting before the meeting of the 18th?
Yeah, I mean, if you got,
I don't think I'll
I
be
mean,
able
an
to.
hour, like at 4:30 or 5 or
Like
something
11
that
days from
day,
now, and I won't be here.
and come up with a recommendation to the council at that time.
You guys are welcome to meet without me, but I'm not going to be available. I'm getting ready to leave, so that's why I agreed to come to this meeting today, so.
I'm out of town all next week.
So am I.
okay.
So how are we going to have a meeting with one person? Got to have at least two, got to have at least two. Got to be at least two of us, right?
Yes.
So,
We could do it before council on the 18th, because you'll be here.
Yeah, I'll be
Will
here.
you be here on the 18th? So if you have recommendations you want to email me, then I could share those with
I'll
the
defer to
committee.
I'll defer to my committee. If I have something specific, I'll send it directly to you, but
Okay.
I'm good with, you know, I've heard the rationale and it makes sense and I get it. So I'm good with whatever you guys want to do.
Okay.
All right.
Well, I guess maybe can we know we have to cut at least 100,000. That's for sure.
Right.
I guess for Alderman Schroeder, I know you threw out 500,000. Is there a target that you want us to go back and let's say come back? Since it sounds like we can't really have another meeting before the next council meeting.
Right.
If you give us a, hey, shoot for 200,000 or 150,000, whatever that number is, we will attempt to take out what projects we can. Obviously, you guys can provide
Gotta
additional
give them first
feedback.
shot at it.
And that way we can tell you the adverse effects of, what it would be if we took out 100 versus 200,000 or.
Why don't we shoot for 500,000 and then we can always add something back in after we hear that rationale?
How did I know that was going to be?
Because there could be some good rationale.
Right, you're right.
I'm not saying there's not.
You guys got a lot of work ahead of you.
But at the end of the day, we can't add in more, that we still have to get 100,000.
Yes.
So we can't add everything back in, but
Dog park will get rid of 70 of that.
25.
Yeah, it is.
That's part of fun too, hopefully.
We just close
Everything
Harris,
I want to get rid of is in 2025. It won't help us for right now.
if we close Harris Field, that's about halfway there.
So we'll work on that. We'll come. We can't have another meeting and it's gonna be tough for you guys to make a recommendation because we, again, aren't gonna have a meeting. If you want, we can bring back these, come back with a revised CIP for the next council meeting and say, we met with F&J. F&J wanted us to cut, well, not only 100, we had to at least cut 100.
Right.
The guidance was cut up to 500,000. These are possible cuts. And then at that point, you guys, the full council can talk about those.
so you don't want to have a F&J meeting before the meeting on the 18th?
There won't be a way to do it. You and I are both going to be gone.
You guys are gonna be gone.
Well,
Well,
no, we're
no,
going to
they'll
be,
be
Ken
here.
and I'll be here on the 18th.
Oh, I thought you said you were out next week.
I am, but
The
that's
next
the
week's the
next,
11th,
that's
the
the
week
next.
after is the
I'm-
18th.
I'm-
So
Monday-
they're both gone next week. We don't have any meetings scheduled.
4:30 F&J.
Right, I meant it was gonna be tough for us to, if you guys come back and say, hey, we want to do $250,000 or something instead, it's gonna be tough for us and if it's right before the meeting to actually implement those changes in the document that council sees. That's all I meant.
Oh,
So you're wanting to make a decision on CIP on the 18th?
I'm saying if this F&J committee has recommendations on what they want to see happen to the CIP, just tell us prior to, like, we need time to make those changes before then we give the document to council, because then otherwise council's gonna be looking at a document that's kind of outdated, you know what I mean, at that point, so if you guys aren't available next week. Now, the other option is, if you don't want us to present this to the full council until the first meeting in October, we can do that too, and we can meet after the next council meeting, and you guys can make a final recommendation, and then we give it to the full council at the first meeting in October. I think that should still give us enough time. I mean, not a ton of time, but it would still give us some time, but not a lot. I mean,
If that works better for you.
Yeah, I mean, we want to give you time to, do what you have to do too. It's not fair to jam it all into 1 week.
I don't want to speak for Ken, but I could meet that Monday, the 18th, earlier in the day. We could meet in the morning. If that would give you time
Or
to,
do you want to meet, I won't be here, but do you want to meet in like an hour before the regular council meeting?
well, he's
well,
saying
that's what we talked about.
there won't be enough time to change the documents.
Oh, I see.
Yeah.
So you got to do it like at 9 AM, so you have time to
I mean,
print them
would
out
you-
and whatever.
would
Do whatever
that
you
help?
It's up to you guys. I'm not here, so.
If we met at 9 AM and then,
I think probably at this point, in order to avoid delaying it anymore, because I know Corey's giving me the nervousness look over there, understandably. Why don't we'll come back, we'll come to the next council meeting. I don't think it's actually gonna take that long, because the reality is the vast majority of the geodet projects on here are probably not optional. There's only a few that are technically optional. So we'll come back with a couple recommendations. The council could talk about whether you want to make any of these cuts. You guys can provide your rationale for why you want to do it, and we'll just go from there. And if they want to have more time to think about it, then we can then punt it to the next council meeting.
Okay. All right.
So no F and J at 4:30 on the 18th.
no, okay.
And in hindsight, if I'm looking at the agenda, we should have moved item 5 up to the item 1, so you wouldn't have to sit here for the whole time. Sorry about that. Review and discussion regarding the municipal court and staffing.
What about budget?
I thought we just covered the budget.
That was
That was just
CIP,
CIP.
believe me,
Oh,
I
geez.
understand your
Can we
pain.
move, can we move item 5 up? 'Cause I'm seriously, she shouldn't have to sit here for another hour for this.
Isn't it fun? Come on.
Well, the good news is that the budget discussion is actually not going to be, it's not gonna be long. It's like 5 minutes, basically.
Okay.
And it actually is,
5 minutes is sometimes longer.
so this is just a quick synopsis, so you know, we've plugged in all the personnel costs for next year, as well as gotten the feedback from the department directors. We're still reviewing some of those numbers. The budget this time around has been a little bit more of a challenge because we're using a new, nuclear gov software. So trying to get the personnel side of it all updated and created has been, a challenge in learning the system. So I'm just gonna preface that. But we're definitely, moving in the right direction. Once we plugged everything in, we definitely are looking at seeing some deficits as far as our first go around. But I know Corey and I have talked about it. And we've got some solutions for how to, we think bridge the gap. So we're pretty optimistic that we'll, be able to meet our needs. Just as now, an FYI, because our net new construction was only 0.38% for 22, the reality is we can only increase our levy by $18,000 or almost $19,000. So that should give you an idea as to what kind of practical challenge that gives the city as a whole. So if you hear anybody in your departments complaining about the city, you can tell them we can increase the entire city budget in terms of the levy by only $19,000. So that should provide some guidance to budget limitations. Now, the things that are helping us, we do have the increased shared revenue for next year, which we just got from the state. That honestly, if it weren't for that, we'd be in a much worse situation. But getting an extra $259,000 is huge, particularly at this situation right now. And then the other positive thing, believe it or not, is the high interest rates are helping us because we're getting a lot of interest right now, income on the money we got in the Associated Bank and LGIP. I mean, it's also helping bridge the gap. So now at the same time, we know that's not going to last forever. And so for next year, we're anticipating interest rates probably going to go back down. So we're reducing our estimated interest income for next year, but that is at least helping bridge the gap until our net new construction, which given the building projects are underway now, we are optimistic net new construction for next year's number that we use for the 24 budget, we think should be higher. I mean, because we have a lot of projects underway right now, which will then give us more levy flexibility, hopefully in the future. But, and then just lastly, rising health insurance costs continue to be the biggest challenge we're facing from a budgetary standpoint, which one of our big goals in 24 is to, relook at our health insurance in terms of, do we offer multiple plans? Do we, do we switch from a self-insured to using, like the state retirement system, for example, or the state's health insurance system, for example, different options. Do we start charging a premium? There's different things we're gonna have to look at for 24. Now that, the police union contract ends in 24. So that's gonna be an opportunity to start implementing something new in 25, because right now we're contractually kind of have our hands tied, really. So these are things that we'll be looking at 24 for implementing 25, which should also help with the budget as well. And lastly, the budget right now, we factored in 2% COLA. The caveat to that is, the 2% COLA, which would take effect January 1, most employees would still be eligible for their step increase. So, conceivably, if somebody gets 2% COLA and their 2% merit step increase, they could be eligible for up to 4% in 24, which when I was at the I went to the senior executive workshop at the league 2 weeks ago. They had a round table with all the cities of 10,000 above, and across the board, the COLAs that people were looking at for 24 were 4%. So the thing is, I don't know if those cities actually have merit. They may only have a COLA and not have a merit step increase. So our 4% then would be comparable, but cities are definitely looking at pretty high COLAs because of inflation and the tough, job market right now. So that's the update for you.
Okey-dokey. Review and discussion regarding the municipal court and staffing.
So as you know, we're gonna have a vacancy for, well, we have vacancy for the judge and we're gonna have a vacancy for the clerk in April when Claudia retires. Ward and I met with the chief, Claudia, to talk about transition and as well as the judge Set was there. And we talked about different options such as, at one point, Jim had suggested, well, maybe, and I'm talking about Jim Duquette, but, maybe bringing the court back over here. We talked about it practically because of the privacy needs they have in terms of space and stuff. They need separate rooms sometimes to meet with juveniles and otherwise. We just don't have a setup in here to be able to do that. So we're probably, it wouldn't be our recommendation to do that. We talked about maybe accepting payments over here, but then that creates a problem. Because if you have the court over there, people want to pay when they're over there, well, tell them to come over here, they're probably just not gonna come over here and then it's just not gonna get paid. So, so in terms of those changes at this point, there's not a strong recommendation to make any changes there. Just some things to think about. One, and this is something that, the chief brought up is, the city could in the future move away from having a municipal court. I mean, the city could basically turn it over to the circuit court and have the circuit court handle our citations going forward. It would save the money. It would save the city money. I mean, financially, we'd be better off doing that because obviously we bring in less in revenues from tickets than we pay out in, staffing costs for maintaining the court. So you can only do that. You can only make that change though at the end of the term of the judge. So it obviously, we just elected a new judge last spring. So you couldn't even make that change for another term, which is 4 years, right, Lacey? So realistically, it's not a change that we can really do in the near term. Ward looked at it. Ward looked at whether you can make a change when you have a vacancy like we do now, and the state says no, you have to actually wait till the official term expires. So this just as an FYI for that. Lastly, and the thing that's kind of more open for, I don't say more for dusk, but something that's more of a discussion item is, and this is something that Claudia brought up and we also wondered about, is maybe, maybe when we replace the court clerk, do you hire a part-time person instead or budget for a part-time person? So that's an option. We'd certainly save money financially. I mean, we could, if you weren't paying health insurance benefits and WRS, for example, we could save at least probably $50,000 for the general fund, which would obviously be helpful. Downside being, you don't know if you only offer a part-time position, would you be able to find somebody who would even take a part-time position? Like, we just don't know. And we have to have somebody. If you have a court, we got to have a court clerk. So, it's kind of a catch-22 as to whether if we only offer a part-time position, would you find somebody qualified to do it? We don't know. Now, I know Claudia had mentioned that she might be interested in being a part-time person after her retirement. On the flip side, I know that would also be dependent on who the judge is going to be, which we don't know who the judge is going to be. So obviously it's going to be decided by the election. Furthermore, the judge, we don't get to pick the court clerk. The judge gets to pick the clerk. So the judge who gets elected in the spring may say they want something completely new. So we can't even, let's say, rely on or count on, let's say, having an interested person because we don't control that. So there you go.
There you go.
Yeah.
Anybody have any questions about that particular topic?
That position is appointed by the judge?
Yes. Yep.
Where is that?
Our only control is over the purse. So that's why if you guys wanted to budget for a part-time position, then we can do that. But in terms of picking who it is, the judge gets to pick.
Well, what are we going to do during the interim? Like, we have Michael Cotter being the interim judge. We're going to have an interim clerk.
We've thought about that question and we're going to sort of let it roll until they say something otherwise, because we don't think that they're going to want to try to find an interim. Like, I don't think an interim judge is going to want to appoint an interim clerk because who are they going to find, honestly? So,
But you got to have a clerk.
right. Yes.
But I'm not leaving until April.
Right, but by April, he's still only halfway through the term.
Not even halfway.
No, so we're gonna have the circuit court appointed, or I should say the chief judge of the district court appointed the interim for the next 90 days.
Right.
Then the council, you guys are gonna have to appoint somebody to fill from the end of the 90-day period, which is like, let's just say is, December, end of December, early January. There's gonna have to be a temporary person from January to April until the special election. And then once the special election gets, then that new judge,
Would
because,
then choose.
yes, because Claudia's retiring at that point, can choose whoever he wants or she wants.
So we're covered until
April.
the special spring election when we get a real full-time judge.
Yes.
Okay. I thought you were leaving sooner than that.
The only thing you have to consider in there is, and he's probably going to say that next,
Yes,
is
yeah.
I'm going to need, I had suggested at least 4 months to train somebody. So you are looking at hiring somebody starting maybe by January. And then again, you run into the situation where now in April, if you have an election, the judge could walk in and say, I don't think it's highly likely that if you've got a clerk in there that knows what she's doing or has at least been trained, that the new judge is going to walk in and say, okay, well, you leave because I'm going to put so-and-so in here
We're gonna have to pay for 2 clerks then.
for at least the training period.
Well, they're not gonna do it for free.
I guess worst case scenario is that,
Look at the look on his face.
I don't know what the likelihood of them choosing somebody else, but if you had some,
It could happen.
I think it's actually pretty light. I think it's at least 50-50, just because you never know. Like, you
Well, just
never
like
know.
a sheriff.
Right,
They're not gonna
exactly.
necessarily take the current undersheriff.
Right.
They want their own person.
Right.
at least you'd
exactly.
have somebody in the interim. Okay, so if you wanted somebody else and you trained somebody for 4 months, yes, you're out that, but at least you're able to train the new person coming in with
Yeah.
somebody.
I'm just saying, we're gonna figure out a way to budget for 2 clerks for 4 months.
Well, I guess, and I know this is Claudia's recommendation. I guess at this point, kind of have a different take on it. There's no other position in the city that we budget for that much of an overlap. I mean,
We normally don't have any
we
overlap.
normally don't have any overlap, and I mean, I know this is, I understand it's complicated, but I think we'd be better off waiting to see who the judge picks, whoever the new judge decides to pick as their deputy. And if once they pick that person, Claudia would be still potentially available if she wants to then train the person once we know who that person's gonna be. But to do it in advance when we don't know who the person's even gonna be
Yeah,
is, to me, taking like a big leap. I mean, that's just,
okay.
The only question I have on that is if I'm going in April and your election is in April, I cannot come back and work for 2.5 months.
Yep.
So now you have a new judge and a new clerk. Because now the judge, that potentially has no training and within a couple of weeks has court.
Well,
Because we have court once a month. So I don't know, unless I'm missing something that you're saying there, right now, that's the potential that you could have is 2 fresh, a judge and a clerk and court.
You said that it could be a part-time job.
Well, I said, I think there's a possibility. Of course, I'm shooting that out of my head with several years of training. It's like a brand new person who has not been involved in the court system should not be put in there part-time.
Do you think that they would elect someone that's not had the experience though?
You had just had another person run against the judge who's never been a judge or a lawyer. So now you're putting it out there that because they do not have to be an attorney, you have a very good potential of having somebody who,
we actually said we prefer an attorney though.
you did this time, but
Yeah.
the spring election
Right,
could potentially be
Sure.
someone who's not a lawyer.
right.
Is there anything that current city staff could train on to cover if we went without a municipal court clerk for any period of time?
Well, I'm sure there's some stuff I could.
Can you make a list?
I'd have to think about that. But there, you got your month end, you've got SDC, you've got court, pretrials. You're not looking at 5 minutes worth of stuff there.
Mhm.
If I remember correctly, city court is once a month still, correct?
Yes.
And about how long is that session? Like, like on a regular basis, like how many tickets or how much,
Initial appearances take roughly an hour or so. Juveniles could take anywhere from 15 minutes to 2 hours plus. Depends on how many we get because they are there's a little more involvement with a juvenile.
but
Yeah.
so on average, that that 1 day a month is anywhere from 4 to 8 hours,
roughly.
roughly, depending on, what happened that
That's
previous
for
month.
the,
and
that's for the judge's part. The clerk,
Right.
there's much more involved.
Of course, yeah.
Yeah, so I tried to think, I have tried, because I know this is all happening at once. I've tried to think of some way where I could maintain it. And I did suggest at the meeting that if I retired and at the beginning of a month, right at, like, say we had court the first week, and then I retired, and then we went 75 days, and I came back, and we would have to skip 1 month of court, which of course we've done before, and we did during COVID. And then we would come back on the third month, we'd have court at the end of the month. We could squeeze that 75 days in, but if you're not talking about getting a clerk in there, that's not doable, because there's certain things that have to be done every month. And then you wouldn't have anybody here. So I've been trying to process, because I didn't know the judge thing was going to happen at the same time. So
Right. Well, it's just, it's not your fault or Mr. Duquette's fault. It's just the way it shook out.
I just don't, of course, you're going to do whatever you'd like, but I don't think not at least training somebody to take over my position before you get a brand new judge. I think that's a really bad
What can we
idea.
afford to do? I mean, that's going to be up to you and Corey. Can we afford to have 2 clerks for 30 days, 60 days? She wants 120, and that doesn't seem like it's going to be available. We're not
Well,
going
it
to
depends.
afford that.
It depends, are you talking full-time, are you talking part-time? Because once you start talking full-time, you're talking health insurance benefits. I mean, I guess what I'm wondering is, and I know, what I was gonna say earlier was, I know Claudia mentioned about you could stack, change the dates such that you could probably buy some time in there and have, a gap and maybe miss 1 court session in there. So, maybe is the option to, when the new judge comes in, say, even if the judge wants let's say the judge wants a new person, let's say they want to pick their person. Well, they are going to be understandable to say, like, hey, there's going to be a transition period. So at that point, once they say, hey, I want my, whoever it is, and maybe that person then starts whatever, a month or 2 in, but then, or let's say starts a month or 2,
Ideally,
if Claudia is, let's say, available to start training theoretically 75 days after her retirement, then maybe, she comes and starts training with that person during the period, and maybe she fills in for a few months. I'm just saying, you might be able to work with the new judge, whoever that is, who they would want, and Claudia, once you know who that person's going to be, and you jigger the.
Doesn't CIVMIC offer like a entry-level city municipal clerk training like they do for all the other kinds of positions in the state? CIVMIC, cities, villages, municipalities, insurance.
I know what it is.
Yeah.
I've never heard of them training municipal.
Well, they train all different kinds of different jobs. I mean, I can't imagine there's not I mean, you got trained by somebody, or you went to a training, or did you just learn on your own?
came in after 20 years at the county.
Right,
So I basically had to learn the
right. I thought there might be some kind of actual training like there is for,
There might be a network of municipal court clerks where
Right.
there could be something we could figure out.
I'd look into that. I mean,
That's
you go to training for being a city clerk.
the Wisconsin certified municipal
Right,
clerk.
but I would think there's got to be some kind of training that is offered somewhere.
we have training for our court software program. It's 2 days. It's Madison. It's ordered by the computer people. The software program that we use.
Yeah,
That's 2 days. But,
okay. Well,
if we had to get right down to the nitty gritty, I could probably work with 60 days. But again, if you have somebody that's doing it that has never been a court clerk before.
but when you're saying 60 days, you're saying like Monday through Friday, 8 to 5 for 2 whole months?
It would be a 40-hour work week or thereabouts for 2 months, yes. But
Boy, that's gotta, I had no idea it was that much, that was that involved, that it would take 2 months, or, 2 months of 8 hours a day for 60 days. I had no idea. But I mean, you've done it for 20 years, so I'd take you at your word, Claudia. I just didn't know it was that involved. I mean, I knew there was obviously paperwork and statutory stuff and whatever.
Talking about dealing with tickets, you're talking about SDC, you're talking about dealing with the public, you're talking about, oh, yeah, the list goes on. No, yeah, ideally it would be 120. I could squeeze 60, but then again, you have to keep your fingers crossed. You get somebody who's got some legal experience.
Well, I'm gonna play a weird card. God forbid tomorrow you get run over by a bus and we appoint a new municipal clerk. Here you go. You're the clerk. Figure it out. I'm serious. I mean, that's what we'd be doing, right? I mean, we're lucky that she's given us advance notice that she's leaving in April, but what if, tomorrow, like I said, God forbid something happens.
I'll tell you, the closest municipality that I'm aware of right now is with that scenario, they've gone through 4 clerks in 2 years.
Oh, boy.
And one municipality in this county gave up on trying to find a clerk, so they sent everything to the county because they could not get a clerk and a judge in there that.
And I'm sure the answer to this is heck no, or maybe even more stern than that. But based upon the confluence of both you and Duquette leaving, there's no way you can stay past April. I'm just spitballing here. I'm trying to come up with a better idea. You're saying 120, he's saying we can't do that.
But my response to that would be is why am I staying past April if you don't want to get another clerk for me to train? You have to have somebody, and yes, the judge is very important, but the clerk is the person that there every day, dealing with the public and dealing with the tickets and
I have
debt
to-
collection and suspending people's driver's license and.
Was it a full-time job?
Well,
I
she said it
didn't
could be a
even-
part-time job, and I think
I
that's the
think
hard sell is, I totally agree
potential.
with Adam. We cannot ask someone to take a job
then
for
make
2
it
to 4
part-time.
months, and
No,
then they
right.
could be let go.
Right.
So we are not gonna find someone part-time with no benefits that might only have a job for 2 to 4 months. So I would say,
I think you need to hire a full-time clerk and you need to give me at least a couple months to train her before you throw a new
I don't
judge
think
into
we
the.
could afford it.
I think we need to wait until after the election.
Yeah, because who's gonna, to your point.
Because you
who's gonna-
can't,
who's
if that judge is gonna pick their own person, we can't bring someone in and then let them go.
Yeah, we might be making a big mistake there. I think we have to wait and find out what the new judge is gonna do.
It's not a great plan, but
What you're asking me to do is postpone my retirement really, so that you can get
Well,
somebody in, unless.
no, I mean,
If you're
I
leaving
would
in
say you
April,
could.
leave in April. You should not stick around just for us. I
I
mean.
know,
You
but-
retire, and
That's our-
that person that
That's
gets hired
that's an
has
us
to do the
problem, not a
job.
you problem.
I know
It's
it
that
is.
simple.
Oh, I know it is. I can walk out the door tomorrow. That's not the point. It's just,
I mean, I know this would be challenging because none of us have, we're all extremely busy, but could we bridge
That's
the
why I-
gap with somebody?
That's why I
entirely?
asked, is there anything you could train any one of our staff on so that we can process payments, or someone shows up for court once a month, or what can be done where we could piece it out if needed at all? But I do not feel comfortable. You guys can tell me what to do and actually it's gonna be Casey posting that job, but I do not foresee us finding a part-time person that will only have a job for 2 months. As soon as the new elected judge comes in, they would let them go. That sounds like an awful opportunity. I would never apply for
I
that.
wouldn't sign up. Yeah,
I agree.
why? I'm most definitely willing to try to teach somebody if they want to come over and sit by me. Have to figure out where to start.
Yep.
What hours right now as a clerk, what hours do you work? Like, what's your work week? Like Monday through Friday from 8 to 5 every day? No.
Work Monday through Thursday, 6 a.m. to 4 p.m.
Okay.
It's been that way for, longer than I've been here.
Right.
So that was some.
Well, do you want to start, Lacey, with getting a list of different,
I would love for
Bullet
Claudia to
points
send
or
over
whatever you
a
wanna
list
call
of
it.
things that are responsibilities, and hey, maybe I'll learn about municipal court myself. I mean, I think as a city, if it's a part of our structure, it's a department, we have to figure out how to man it and facilitate it, and I have no idea if we can just not have municipal court. I mean, if we just close for 2 months, is that acceptable? I highly
well,
doubt it.
we did it during COVID. We pushed, in the circuit courts at the county, we had pushed homicides back 6, 8, 10, 12 months. You can
Okay.
do it.
Well, and
The
you
worst
just
thing that
said
happens is
there's
it's reset
another
1,000,000 times.
municipality that can't
I went,
keep a clerk and can't keep a judge, and so the
I
county
went
took
two.
over.
I
Well,
only had to go two because our restrictions were a little bit different than yours. And I was able to figure out a way that we could get it done without having to continue to push things back. You guys are a different field
Right.
over there than I am.
Right.
So the municipal courts were able to reopen a lot quicker if they could provide a plan to the district that worked, and we did. So.
and I
Yeah,
would say,
we've had snow months. I mean, I've had 1 month where the judge got stuck in over there, so we handled it. I handled it. So
but do not postpone your retirement, because if we
I
elect a
plan
new
on it
judge
right
that
now.
doesn't want you either, then
Yeah.
I just, the
Does it
time-
make
So
sense?
are you guys for the committee, are the two of you good with getting a list from Claudia of the major, these are the top 50 things or whatever that I do, and sending them to Lacey and start parsing them out?
Well, Claudia did give me she gave me a list of her job duties or duties of the court clerk. I don't know if you think that's accurate or
It's a good
sufficient.
starting point.
Okay.
I think the best thing to do would be, I don't know if you want to start piecemealing it all over the place, because it's, I think you'd be better off to see if you could figure out one person
Okay.
that could spend some time with me, go upstairs in court with me a couple of times, come over when I've got SDC to do, learn how to do payments. There's a lot there.
Okay.
And just
I cannot sit here and say, okay, on Tuesday of next week, you should send so-and-so over. I walk in and do what I got to do that day. I don't have a specific layout. I have to wait until there's a week of court. I think if you can find a person that you think you want to have work with me, then I think it would be better off if I said, okay, tomorrow I should have somebody from 9 to 11 or something like that, and give me the opportunity to, because it's not something I've ever had to think about. So, and again, I don't have a routine. I have a small routine every day, but otherwise I'm taking it as it's coming in. So,
Well, whether it's days or weeks or minutes or anything, it's more than what we're getting right now. Like I said, if you just walked away and said, good luck, figure it out, we'd be stuck. So even if we can get 2 days, 3 days, 5 days worth of training, whatever we can get,
Between now and April.
yeah,
yeah, if we can get somebody
not
that.
perfect, but
if we
we're
can
not
get
in a
somebody
perfect
that-
situation.
Get somebody that can come over there and sit with me, and starting sooner versus later, that'll give me more of an opportunity to make sure at least somebody's got a ballpark idea, and then see where we are after the new judge election.
And the built-in redundancy, Lacey, is that you'll have a backup to the municipal clerk. If this person whether it's you or whoever you're going to choose to get trained, they can still have enough knowledge that if the municipal clerk leaves, quits, gets sick, whatever, we have a backup. Because right now you have no backup, right? Yeah. So I mean, that's, the built-in redundancy is probably a good thing for us. We should have thought of this.
And I also submitted with my retirement notice that I said that it's not like I'm leaving town, so I will be around if all of a sudden the new judge appoints a new clerk and she walks out 2 weeks later. At that point, then, as long as my 75 days has passed, I can come and help. So,
just out of curiosity, Alderman McClory was asking about the hours. Do you know how the hours were set for the Monday through Thursday? What the
the clerk said, I want to work Monday through Thursday from 6 to 4. The judge approved it and the council approved it in somewhere in the 80s.
Even I wasn't there here.
Or well, it might have been the 90s.
Oh, maybe it
I take
was
that
me.
back. Maybe it was like 97. I have the resolution sitting in my desk drawer. That's how I knew it
So
was.
there's not an underlying, there's no need for the position itself or the business operations of the court to be Monday to Thursday. It was a request of the clerk.
Correct.
Okay.
And I liked those hours, so I didn't have to. So we kept them.
Friday's off.
So if I may, though, I think
Please.
for all these reasons, I think 3 years from now, it's a good time to bring this back around and kind of remember this conversation and what we talked about today and the benefits of actually going out to circuit cut, knowing you're going to get back up there with the clerk of court's office. You don't have to worry about just having a clerk. You're going to have a qualified person on the bench, not just someone that is a citizen running for election. So I think we need to take a look at all of those things so that we don't have to worry about a lot of these issues going forward when it's time.
Good point.
I agree. At that time, it's out there a ways, but I never realized
It goes by very
that her
fast.
job
Of
was
course
a
it does.
full-time job. I
Well,
thought
and-
Claudia was part-time. I really did all this time. So
You start looking ahead of time, 2.5 years from now, because there are, as we discussed in our meeting last week, we believe there are issues that you'll also want to think about as far as even going out there in the first place. So there's a, things that have to be looked at that point too.
All right.
We can count on the chief, you can bring it up again in 3 years, chief. So, we're counting on you to still be around, so no pressure, but.
God, you remember that.
Joel and I started a year apart, so why he hasn't retired yet and I did, I don't know. 30 years was enough for me. All right, so have we effectively put that to bed, at least for the time being? Put a pin in it, as my grandma used to always want to say?
How do you feel?
But the only thing I'd say is, whether to make it a full-time or part-time position is a question that's kind of up in the air, and it's tough because, again, I just don't, we need to know for budgeting purposes, but on the flip side.
I would say no, we're not going to make it a full-time position.
Thank you. Part-time.
Do you guys disagree with me?
After you hire someone in April, you're saying?
I'm saying,
Yep.
yes, I'm saying once Claudia retires, is it going to be filled by a full-time or part-time person? I'm saying that's the question that, for budgeting purposes, we kind of need to have answered, but we also understand that there's not an easy answer because obviously Claudia's been doing it. She's got the experience. She can probably do it faster than somebody else who's new. On the flip side, maybe you can make it work.
We may not, look to Lacey's point, we may not have any takers. If we
Well-
say it's a part-time job with no benefits, we may have no choice.
And that's the reason I'm saying it's tough for us to know what to
Right.
do, because we don't want to necessarily budget for a part-time position and then you can't find anybody and then you have to then
Well,
do
then
it
budget for a
full-time.
full-time
So
position. We can always roll backwards from that. I mean, for numbers crunching for Corey and whoever, make it budget for a full-time position, yes.
Yep.
Knowing that we may rescind that or revoke it or roll it back when we look at how the numbers shake out.
So are you open for payments every day from Monday to Thursday, Claudia?
Yes, I'm sitting there.
Okay.
We also have a drop box. For those who don't know, we have a drop box and envelopes right outside my door. Those are used. I will say though that since COVID, a lot of the money, can't give you percentages off the top of my head, but a great deal of the money comes in through STC or credit card payments. People are getting a lot better I've made a point to, in about 5 different places, make sure that they know there's a place to go online and make their payment. And I would say, just throwing it out there, roughly, probably at least 60% or more are credit cards. I handle very little cash. I get a couple checks once in a while, but the majority are paid by credit card. People that know the system don't bother paying. I get it through SDC, mostly at tax time. That's the biggest time of the year for us to get. But people do use the Dropbox. People on payment plans are really good about, I always make sure they know that box is there. The lobby's open 24/7. They can make a payment. I have my regulars who pay every month. I get to work one morning and there's a Dropbox there. The hours that I'm in there are not affected by the payments at the window. It's more, if you want to go Monday through Friday or Monday, Wednesday, Friday, or whatever you want to do, that's not going to make a difference. As long as you get it out there publicly and the court letters are changed and the doors changed and all those little things, so.
Does that help?
That does. Thank you.
Okay.
And I just want to thank you guys again for meeting today and really looking at it.
Sorry to make you
deeply.
wait, Claudia.
So, thank you.
All right, is there a motion to adjourn?
So moved.
And a second? And all in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Aye.